In this video, we're going to talk about Android UI and UX pertaining to material design. I guess the first question we need to ask is, what is UI? What does that stand for? UI stands for user interface. So a user interface is what allows user to interface or interact with something. In this case, we can interact, for instance, with smartphones, tablets, websites, desktop computer, and so much more. Now, in the modern era, we often use UI, user interface, to refer to what we call the look and feel of something. In this case, it would be of an application or device. For instance, we could say Android apps UI interfaces are different from that of iOS apps. So what this means is the way things look and feel are different on different devices. Clearly, the way things look on an Android device are different from the way things look on an iOS device or Windows device and so forth. Now, the next logical question would be, what constitutes a good user interface? So what makes a good user interface? Now, there are a lot of different points I could have added to answer this question, right? But I feel like the most important points are these 6 ones here, okay? So what makes a good user interface? Number 1 would be clarity. So people must be able to recognize what is it they are interacting with. They need to understand what the interface is helping them interact with. Okay, so a user interface that shows clarity, meaning that everything is laid out for users to actually use, brings clarity. So as users are interacting with a device, a user interface, they need to be able to predict what will happen when they use it. So clarity inspires confidence, which leads to further use. So if the user interface doesn't inspire confidence or clarity, then that's not going to be a good user interface. Now, the second point is enables interaction. So the whole idea of having a user interface is so that users can use it, interact with it. Users need to feel a part of the interaction. Interfaces allow users to feel inspired, to feel closer to the world in which they are part of. Focused. A good user interface has to be focused. So it needs to stay and keep users focused at one thing only. Not 10, not 20, not 2, just one thing. One primary item per screen. So you can imagine if you have a user interface that has a lot of items, a lot of things that user needs to interact with, that can be a little bit too confusing. So if you make your user interface one screen to do just one thing, that constitutes a good user interface. Number 4, you need to keep users in control. Give users control because they are more comfortable when they are in control. So you don't want users to feel as if they are not in control when they are interacting with your device or application. So this will also avoid confusing the user. So we need to let them feel and be in control. So the user interface needs to facilitate the interaction between the user and the device or application. Also, we need to make sure that it provides a natural second step. So users need to intuitively know what comes next as they interact with a good user interface. Don't let users hanging after they have done what you want them to do. For instance, if there's a button that when they press or click, they need to be taken to a different screen, which means that is the expected reaction, that is the expected interaction. But if that doesn't happen, then we are not making this natural second step natural, right? So we are breaking the cycle, if you will. So you have to make sure that the user interface provides a natural second step. So users need to know intuitively what comes next as they interact with your device or application. And 6, we need to think about intuitive. Touched some of these topics in previous numbers here, but it's very important to understand that the whole idea here is that we want the users to feel part of this world that we are wanting them to interact with. The user interface has to be intuitive. Appearance follows behavior. What that means, things need to behave the way we expect. No surprises. Okay, so when things behave to our expectation in real life, we feel included and we feel like we have a good relationship with it. All user interface elements should look like how they behave. If it looks like a button, it surely should act like a button, period. Okay, so there's no middle ground there. A good example here would be, for instance, this Pandora app, right? You know exactly what to do when you look at it. So there is a circle in the middle there, which is a plus sign, which means create a station. So there are no distractions. There's nothing too distracting there. Everything is there as it's supposed to be. Okay, so we have text that is guiding users again. The colors are all balanced. And at the bottom, we have another button. You know it's a button because it says browse, and you know it's circular, just like as the plus button at the top. So you know it's a button. You click on that, then you can browse. There's also text, but very, very, very simple. So that would be a good example of a good user interface because it has clarity, so you know exactly what to expect. It enables interaction. You can interact with it without any problem. It's focused. The focus here is to get people to create station or browse music. Keep user in control. The user is in total control here. They can either create station or browse. So they have the control. There's nothing else that is required for them to do that's beyond their control. Okay, and provides a natural step, of course. When you browse, you know exactly what should happen. If you were to click on browse and then all of a sudden we have a leprechaun dancing, that wouldn't be good, right? Because that breaks this natural next step cycle that all good user interfaces have. Okay? And 6 is very intuitive. Appearance follows behavior, meaning if you create a station, tap on that button, you should be taken to the screen where you can create a station. If you go to the browse, you should go back to browse music to be able to browse music. Now, the next thing we need to talk about is the UX, which stands for user experience. So what is user experience? You can think of the user experience as the overall experience of a person using a product such as a website, a computer application, mobile application, and so forth. Okay. Now, when we talk about a good user experience, there's a lot of things that come to mind. Okay. Now, what makes a great UX, a great user experience, is a combination of what we talked previously, what constitutes a good user interface. But there's a little bit more to that. Okay. As you can see here, a great user experience has to be useful. It sounds very trivial, but it's very important. Okay, yes, we have to provide useful content, original, and fulfill a need. People have to be able to do something so that they are fulfilled. There's something they're trying to solve, something they're trying to accomplish. It's desirable. So a good user interface allows for users to feel that they desire whatever they're interacting with, right? So you usually need to have good images, identity, brand, or other design elements are used to capture the user and invoke emotion and appreciation. If you look at this kid, he is indeed in a place where he desires to be. He is happy. He feels as if all the elements around him are helping him to be happy or helping him to feel appreciation from the nature. In this case, he is on the beach. The other point is a user experience that is a good user experience has to be accessible. So people with disabilities need to also be able to access the content. Also, it needs to be findable, so easy to navigate, easy to go through and find content. So if you have an application that allows users to read the news, right? You have to make sure you really categorize everything, because if I open that application, I want to be able to go find exactly what I need to consume that day. If I want to know about the weather, it should be very clear to me where I go to find news about the weather. If I want to find out about how the world is doing in the world of politics, I need to be able to do that as well. Next will be usable, so easy to use, period. There's nothing to it, okay? People need to be able to go and get what they want and navigate freely. Now, all of these points, useful, desirable, accessible, findable, credible, usable, all of these make it so that our user experience has to be valuable, because the whole idea here is that we are giving value. So a good application, a good device, a good user experience, a good UI, user interface, has to allow for value. right? It has to allow users to feel as if they are getting a lot of value without a lot of friction, meaning that if they need something, need to read something, need to touch something, need to interact with something, it has to be as open, as clear, as useful as possible, which all of that putting together constitutes something that is valuable to the user. So whenever we start talking about building applications using material design or building good UX design or building good UI design, we have to think about the user first, because the users are ultimately why we build our applications, right? So we need to always think in those terms. What value are we bringing in? How are they interacting with this application? How can we make it good, easier? So the design, user interface design, is not just about making things pretty, right? In fact, pretty is not part of having a good user interface design. Pretty is the result of having a good user experience and a good user interface design. So making things pretty, bright color, that's not everything that makes up a good user interface. All right, so in the next videos, we'll discuss into details how to use material design for Android and use this concept that we've discussed here about user interface and user experience to craft real world applications that will wow your users, not just because they're just wonderful, they're beautiful, but also they have good user experience as well as good user interface. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.